Welcome to today's deep dive. We're about to unpack one of history's absolute most chilling unsolved cases. We'll be stepping right into the freezing darkness of the Ural Mountains to look at a mystery that's literally baffled experts for over 60 years.
Okay, I want you to picture this. You're camping out in the freezing mountains of the Soviet Union. It's the dead of night, the wind is just howling outside, and the temperature, it's plummeted below minus 30 degrees Celsius. Then, suddenly, something terrifies you and your friends so badly that you slice through your own tent from the inside. Not unzipping the door, but actually cutting through the fabric itself, and you just flee into the deadly cold. No boots, no jackets, no supplies, just pure panic.
Well, that's exactly what happened here. And what searchers found weeks later was a completely bizarre scene. Within hours of fleeing that tent, all 9 of these highly experienced hikers were dead. Some of them were found nearly naked in that minus 30-degree weather. Others had sustained massive internal trauma. We're talking broken ribs, a fractured skull, and one was even missing her tongue. But here's the kicker. There were absolutely no signs of a struggle, or any evidence whatsoever of a murder.
Part 1. Cold War Winter Expedition.
Let's look at how this all started. Back in January 1959, a 23-year-old engineering student named Igor Dyatlov led a group of 10 healthy, really well-trained hikers into the northern Ural Mountains. Now, one member actually got sick and turned back early, which honestly was a decision that absolutely saved his life. The remaining 9 pressed on. And diaries and photos we recovered later show them laughing, smiling, and just in great spirits right up until February 1st, 1959. That's when they established their final camp. It wasn't until weeks later that search teams would finally stumble upon their abandoned tent.
Now, their choice of campsite is incredibly crucial here. They pitched their tent on the exposed eastern slope of a mountain called Kholatsyakhl. In the local Mansi language, this translates pretty chillingly, I might add, to the Mountain of the Dead. Yeah. Instead of moving down into the safer, sheltered forest just a bit further away, they set up right there on the completely exposed mountainside.
Part 2. A trail of bizarre evidence.
So investigators arrive and they find footprints leading away from this /tent. But here's the weird part. They weren't running. The hikers seemingly just walked calmly away from safety straight into the freezing night. Some were just in socks or even bare feet. Following these tracks for about a mile, searchers found the first 2 victims under a large cedar tree. They had died from hypothermia right next to a small, desperate little fire. Between that tree and the tent, they found 3 more bodies, including Dyatlov himself, frozen in positions that made it look like they were actively crawling back to the camp. But it actually took months for the snow to melt enough to find the final 4 victims, who were located at the bottom of a deep ravine.
And this is where things get really wild. There was a stark, completely baffling contrast in the victims' injuries. The first 5 found in the forest and the snow, they just died from hypothermia due to exposure. Makes sense, right? But the 4 found later in the ravine suffered massive trauma. A fractured skull, crushed ribs. Investigators actually compared the sheer internal force to what you'd see in a serious high-speed car crash. One victim was missing eyes, and another was missing her tongue. Yet, inexplicably, there were 0 external wounds on any of them to indicate a physical attack by a person or even a wild animal.
Part 3. Soviet Secrecy and Paranoia. You have to remember the intense geopolitical climate of the Cold War era. Because of that extreme Soviet paranoia, evidence was poorly preserved, and local investigators were heavily restricted by the state. After just a few months, Soviet authorities abruptly slammed the book shut on the case. Their official conclusion? They simply stated that the hikers died because of an unknown compelling force. No further details were provided. Talk about leaving you hanging, right?
Because the Soviet government controlled the investigation so tightly and actually went as far as sealing the entire mountain area off to the public for years, they inadvertently bred some absolutely wild public paranoia. People were left completely in the dark, desperately wondering, what exactly are the authorities trying so hard to hide?
So naturally, this massive lack of transparency just fueled explosive speculation. It spread like wildfire. On one hand, you had the military weapons test theory. The Cold War context meant secret weapons experiments were pretty common. Witnesses even reported seeing strange orange lights in the sky around the time of the incident, which led to whispers of classified rockets or explosives causing all that internal trauma. But then, on the other hand, you had the paranormal theories. We're talking rumors of aliens, yetis, or supernatural forces haunting the mountain. But let's ground this back in reality. Over time, forensic experts stepped in to demystify some of the most macabre clues. Remember that missing tongue of Lyudmila Dubinina, which sparked so many crazy foul play rumors? Well, it was actually just the result of natural decomposition and scavenging animals, because their body was found submerged in a stream months later. And what about that strange radioactive contamination found on some of the hikers' clothing? It turns out some of those group members had previously worked in civilian environments where low-level radioactive contamination was just kind of the norm.
Part 4. Modern Science and Survival.
Stripping away all that folklore, one really fascinating modern scientific theory involves something called infrasound. So under certain conditions, howling mountain winds can create low-frequency sound waves. Now, humans can't directly hear these, but we can physically feel them. This infrasound can literally induce extreme anxiety, confusion, and totally irrational panic. It's definitely a compelling idea for why they might have slashed their own tent to escape some invisible terror. Although scientists do know that this still doesn't quite explain those crushed ribs we found in the ravine. Today, though, many experts point to the slab avalanche theory, and this is heavily backed by advanced computer simulations. Here's how it goes. First, a block of snow shifts abruptly on the shallow slope just above their tent. Then, the hikers wake up, hear this massive roar, and totally panic in the dark, thinking a massive avalanche is about to bury them alive. So, they slash the tent and run. Once they're outside, the extreme cold and severe hypothermia quickly kicks in, impairing their judgment and separating the group. Finally, the survivors wandering around in the blinding darkness suffer those fatal, crushing injuries by falling blindly over the edge into that deep, rocky ravine. It's basically a tragic domino effect.
Part 5. An enduring frozen mystery.
You know, I think this story continues to terrify and fascinate us precisely because of the human element. These were not soldiers on some classified secret mission. They weren't criminals. They were just ordinary, happy, young university students enjoying a winter adventure together. They were laughing and planning their futures that were cut violently short by something they just couldn't understand.
And because there were absolutely no survivors to tell the tale, the Mountain of the Dead gets to keep its frozen secret. We have the forensic data now, sure, and we have our scientific models, but the mountain forces us to forever wonder, what terrifying force truly drove 9 highly experienced hikers to abandon their only safety and walk barefoot right into the deadly darkness?